An entire classroom went silent at 9:14 a.m. in 1985. When the principal opened the door, every child was gone, except for one boy standing on the teacher's desk, whispering, "They chose me," before collapsing. "What happens next will leave you speechless." He was left alone, whispering secrets no one else heard. Subscribe to uncover what "they chose me" really means. This story will shock you. At exactly 9:14 a.m., Principal Douglas Merritt paused just outside room 12, his footsteps faltering as a sudden silence reached his ears. The muffled hum of youthful energy he expected was gone, replaced by an unnatural stillness that sent a chill crawling up his spine. His hand hesitated on the door handle before gently pushing it open, expecting the usual chaos of squirming students, whispered jokes, and the faint scratch of pencils on paper. Instead, he was met with an eerie void. The classroom was empty. Desks sat deserted in neat rows, untouched notebooks and abandoned pencils scattered as if the children had vanished mid-lesson. Only one figure remained, a lone boy standing atop the teacher's desk, his slender frame trembling subtly. Ethan Caldwell. The name echoed in Merritt's mind with a mixture of surprise and concern. Ethan, usually quiet, always in the back corner, never causing trouble. But now his eyes were wide, glazed, staring past the walls as though seeing something invisible to everyone else. His lips barely parted, whispering a phrase that sounded fragile and hollow. "They chose me." Merritt's heart quickened as he stepped inside, the floor creaking beneath his shoes. "Ethan? What's going on? Are you all right?" His voice cracked slightly, betraying the unease settling deep in his chest. The boy didn't respond, his gaze still distant. Then, without warning, Ethan's legs buckled and he collapsed to the floor with a dull thud. Merritt rushed forward, catching him just in time, the boy's body limp and unresponsive in his arms. "Ethan, talk to me. What happened to the others?" Merritt's voice rose, mixing desperation with authority. The classroom was too quiet, too empty. His eyes darted from one vacant desk to another, searching for any clue, any sign of the missing boys who should have been there learning, laughing, living. But there was nothing. No chairs overturned, no papers strewn wildly, no sounds of disturbance. Just silence, the silence of absence. Kneeling beside Ethan, Merritt noted the pale hue of the boy's skin and the faint tremor in his hands. Ethan's lips fluttered, repeating again, barely audible, "They chose me." Merritt's brow furrowed, confusion battling with rising alarm. Who were they? And why was Ethan left behind? His mind raced through possibilities. Had this been some cruel prank? A sudden emergency? A mass illness? None fit the unnatural scene before him. His pulse thumped loudly in his ears as he supported Ethan's head, feeling the boy's shallow breaths. Around him, the morning light filtered softly through the classroom windows, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and shift, as if the room itself held its breath. The faint scent of chalk dust and old paper lingered in the air, grounding Merritt even as his thoughts spiraled. A low rumble from the hallway jolted him back. "Principal Merritt!" came the urgent call from Mr. Bennett, the school counselor, his face pale and drawn as he hurried in. "I heard. What happened? Is Ethan okay?" Bennett's voice trembled slightly, eyes scanning the empty room in disbelief. Merritt shook his head, his jaw clenched. "I don't know where the others are. Ethan, he's barely conscious. Keeps saying only they chose me." He glanced down at the boy, now slipping between awareness and darkness, and felt an overwhelming weight settle on his shoulders. The responsibility was immense. These were children entrusted to his care, and suddenly they were gone, vanished as if swallowed whole. "God, this can't be real," Bennett whispered, his voice cracking. "Where would they even go? There's no sign of struggle, no explanation." Merritt's eyes swept the room again, lingering on the rows of empty desks, the silent echo of children who should have been sitting there. His mind fought against the rising dread, searching for any rational explanation. But deep inside, he knew this was no ordinary disappearance. The hallway outside began to fill with concerned voices and footsteps as teachers and staff gathered, drawn by the silence and Merritt's earlier calls. Yet, within room 12, time seemed to freeze. The unanswered question hung thick in the air, heavier than any doubt or fear. Where were the other boys? It was as if the classroom had swallowed them whole. The news spread through Fairbrook like wildfire. Children had vanished from room 12 at Lincoln Elementary. Outside the school, a crowd of frantic parents gathered, their voices rising in panic and confusion. Mothers clutched one another's arms, eyes wide with disbelief, while fathers paced anxiously, scanning every face for answers. The morning sun cast long shadows across the brick facade, but the warmth failed to touch the cold tension thick in the air. Principal Douglas Merritt stood at the entrance, his usually steady hands trembling ever so slightly as he raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "We're doing everything we can," he said, his voice calm but strained, eyes flicking toward the school doors as if expecting the missing boys to walk back at any moment. "Please, stay calm and let the authorities handle this." His words were met with murmurs of unease. Calm was a fragile thing slipping through their fingers. Inside, the sterile quiet of the nurse's office contrasted sharply with the chaos outside. Ethan Caldwell lay on the cot, pale and shivering, his thin frame barely moving except for his shallow breaths. The nurse, a middle-aged man with soft eyes named Mr. Hargrove, checked Ethan's pulse again, frowning at how weak the boy seemed. Ethan's lips barely parted, but his whispered phrase echoed in the still room. "They chose me." The words were a ghost, haunting and unanswered. Mr. Bennett, the school's guidance counselor, entered quietly, his steps careful on the linoleum floor. A man of few words, he had spent years working with troubled children, but nothing in his experience prepared him for this. He knelt beside Ethan, studying his distant gaze. "Ethan, can you tell me who they are?" His voice was gentle, patient. The boy's eyes flickered briefly but remained unfocused, his whisper repeating like a broken record. Bennett's mind raced. Who could they be? What invisible force gripped this boy? He pulled out his phone and dialed Ethan's father, Gregory Caldwell. When the call connected, Bennett's voice was calm but urgent. "Gregory, Ethan is awake, but he keeps saying something I don't understand. They chose me. Has he said anything like this at home? Anything strange?" Gregory's voice was tight with disbelief. "No, nothing. Ethan's been acting normal, just the usual school stress. I don't know what's happening, but we need answers." The line went silent except for the faint hum of the phone. Meanwhile, Detective Marcus Lane arrived at the school, his sharp eyes taking in the scene with methodical calm. He was a man accustomed to chaos, but this felt different. He moved through the halls, noting the locked classroom doors, the absence of any sign of forced entry, the whispers of worried teachers. His notebook was ready, but his mind was already searching for patterns in the chaos. Outside, Mayor Caldwell, no relation to Ethan's family, stood before a hastily assembled press corps. His face was tight with concern, lips pressed into a thin line as he spoke. "We are mobilizing all resources to find these children. Fairbrook is a safe community, and we will get to the bottom of this." But his eyes betrayed a deeper worry, one he carefully masked behind practiced speeches. Back in the nurse's office, Ethan's whisper grew more insistent, his small hand twitching as if reaching for something unseen. Bennett watched him closely, feeling a chill creep up his spine. The question gnawed at everyone who knew Ethan. Why was he the only one left behind? The others, gone without a trace, while he remained, lost and frightened. The school corridors felt heavier now, the walls holding secrets that no one dared speak aloud. Teachers whispered about strange noises, flickering lights in room 12 earlier that morning, a cold draft that swept through the halls without cause. Parents exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that this disappearance was no accident. There was something unseen at work, something beyond reason. As Bennett sat quietly beside Ethan, the boy's eyes finally locked onto his own, filled with a depth of fear that words could not capture. The silence between them was thick, broken only by Ethan's faint whisper repeating the same haunting phrase. "They chose me." There was a chill in the air, a sense that something unseen was at work. Detective Marcus Lane stepped cautiously through the silent hallways of Lincoln Elementary, his polished shoes making soft echoes against the linoleum floor. The school felt empty, drained of its usual energy, as if it held its breath. He approached room 12 slowly, pushing the door open with a measured hand. Inside, the room was eerily still, desks perfectly aligned but vacant, save for the faint imprint of where the boys once sat. The sunlight filtered weakly through the windows, casting long shadows that danced quietly across the scuffed floorboards. Marcus's eyes scanned for any sign of disturbance, broken glass, scuff marks, a dropped notebook, but found none. It was as if the children had vanished into thin air. A chill ran down his spine as he recalled the witness accounts. Several teachers and janitorial staff had reported flickering shadows near the windows just before the disappearances. Shadows? Marcus muttered, the word feeling heavy in his mouth. He crouched near the window, tracing the faint outline of footprints that seemed to fade abruptly. No forced entry, no broken locks, nothing conventional. This was no simple kidnapping. Marcus's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to the present. He answered quickly. Detective Lane. The voice on the other end was tense. Ethan Caldwell is still unconscious, but he's muttering something. No one understands the words. They sound like gibberish. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had expected resistance, but this was something else entirely. The hospital room was sterile and cold. Marcus stood by the bedside, watching Ethan's pale face twitch as he whispered those strange phrases. The boy's eyes fluttered under closed lids, his small hands clenched tightly against the hospital sheets. "Who are you speaking to, Ethan?" Marcus asked softly, but the boy's lips moved too faintly to catch words. The voice was low, urgent, filled with a haunting despair. Determined to uncover more, Marcus spent the evening visiting the homes of the missing boys' families. At each doorstep, he was met with anxiety and fear, parents clinging to hope yet trembling under the weight of the unknown. Many children had shared unsettling dreams in the nights leading up to the disappearances, visions of shadowy figures and soft voices calling them by name. At one home, a father showed Marcus a notebook filled with his son's hastily scribbled drawings, dark forests, glowing circles, and shadowy forms reaching out from beyond. "Did your son say anything about these dreams?" Marcus asked, tracing the images with a finger. The father nodded, voice cracking. "He said the voices promised safety, but only if he followed them, like he was chosen for something important." Marcus's mind raced, piecing together a puzzle that defied logic. The phrase Ethan whispered over and over, "They chose me," was no random utterance. It was a thread pulling at something deeper, something unseen. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. These were not ordinary disappearances. Somewhere beneath the surface, something was stirring, something old and inexplicable. Back in the dim glow of his rented motel room, Marcus reviewed his notes, the eerie images and fragmented accounts swirling in his mind. He rubbed his temples, fighting the rising tension. "What are you hiding, Ethan? And who exactly are they?" He whispered to the empty room. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes, as if carrying voices just beyond hearing. Marcus felt an unsettling presence, a cold awareness that the answers he sought would not come easily or safely. The deeper he delved, the more questions tangled around the truth. Gregory Caldwell stood rigid in the dimly lit living room, the shadows cast by the flickering fireplace dancing across the worn carpet and faded wallpaper. The hum of distant voices from the growing group of concerned parents seeped through the thin walls, a constant reminder that the town's patience was wearing thin. His jaw clenched as he ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, the frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior threatening to spill over. He didn't believe in whispered warnings or unseen forces. There was no room for superstition in his world, not when his son's safety was at stake. "We need answers," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Simon Voss, the private investigator Gregory had hired, was methodical in his approach. The room where Ethan slept was untouched since the boys' collapse, an eerie silence hanging over the neatly made bed and scattered schoolbooks. Simon's eyes scanned the space, taking in every detail, every inch that might hold a clue. His expression was one of quiet skepticism, brows furrowed in concentration. "If there's anything here that explains where the other boys went, I'll find it," he assured Gregory, his voice calm but firm. The two men worked in tandem. Gregory insisted on facts. Simon hunted for them with the precision of a hawk. Hours passed as Simon reviewed the school's surveillance tapes, watching grainy black and white images of empty halls and vacant classrooms. The footage offered little, just flickers of shadows and empty seats. Interviews with the remaining staff brought stories of unexplained noises and uneasy feelings, but no solid leads. Still, Simon pressed on, convinced that the truth was buried somewhere beneath the surface of their doubts. Late into the night, Gregory sat by the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. His mind raced, refusing to quiet. The idea that his son might have been targeted, chosen for some unknown purpose, gnawed at him. "Why Ethan? Why him?" he whispered, his voice cracking. He stared at the blank wall as if the answers might somehow appear there. Suddenly, Simon's voice broke the silence, sharp and urgent. "Gregory, you need to see this." He held out an envelope, plain, unmarked, yellowed with age. "I found it tucked beneath Ethan's bed." Gregory took it hesitantly, fingers trembling slightly as he pulled it open. Inside lay a collection of cryptic symbols, drawn meticulously with dark ink, and a small, hand-sketched map of the school grounds. The map was rough but detailed, marking spots no one in the school staff had mentioned before. Gregory's eyes narrowed as he traced the lines. "What is this? Some kind of joke?" His voice held a bitter edge, but beneath it lay a flicker of curiosity, a crack in his disbelief. Simon shook his head slowly. "No joke. Whoever left this knew something. These symbols, they look like ancient runes or something similar. I've seen them before in old texts. They might be a warning or a guide." He paused, eyes darkening. "And the map? It shows a section of the school no one talks about. A hidden area." The room seemed to grow colder, the weight of the discovery settling heavily between them. Gregory swallowed hard, the implications sinking in. Why wasn't this found before? How did it stay hidden under Ethan's bed? He looked at his son's empty room with new suspicion, as if it held secrets waiting to be uncovered. Simon's gaze sharpened, his voice low but steady. "This isn't just about missing kids anymore, Gregory. It's a puzzle and we just found the key. But the question is, what door does it open?" Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows with a sudden urgency, as if the very town sensed the shifting tides beneath its surface. The restless murmurs of the parents echoed louder now, demanding answers from shadows that refused to speak. Gregory's heart pounded, a mix of fear and determination fueling him. He would uncover the truth no matter the cost. The envelope was a key, but to what door? Simon Voss laid the envelope carefully on the worn oak table in Principal Merritt's cluttered office. The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting long, thin shadows across the faded papers and scattered coffee mugs. Detective Marcus Lane leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he traced the intricate symbols on the yellowed parchment inside the envelope. "These aren't just doodles," Marcus murmured, fingertips hovering just above the strange, angular markings. "They look like runes, ancient writing of some kind." Principal Merritt rubbed his temples, the weight of the day pressing down hard on his shoulders. "I've been with this school for over 20 years, and I've never heard of a basement beneath Lincoln Elementary that isn't on the blueprints. No one on staff knows about this. It's like it was erased." His voice was low but firm, a flicker of unease threading through the calm he usually projected. Simon unfolded the small map tucked inside the envelope, careful not to crease it further. The faded lines sketched out a section of the school's foundation, one that did not match the current building plans. At the bottom corner, an X marked a spot near the janitor's closet. "If this is right," Simon said, his voice steady but with a hint of excitement, "there's an old, forgotten basement down there. It might hold answers." Marcus exchanged a look with Merritt. The detective's gaze was sharp, measuring the risks. "We can't ignore this. Whatever's going on, it's tied to those kids disappearing. Tomorrow morning, we check it out." His words were calm but carried an edge of urgency. That night, Fairbrook felt different. The quiet streets seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the town itself was holding its breath. Whispers wound through conversations in dimly lit kitchens and hushed voices in churches. Something ancient stirred beneath the school, something waiting for the right moment. Inside the Caldwell house, Gregory paced the narrow living room, his fists clenched at his sides. The soft ticking of the wall clock was the only sound besides his heavy breaths. His eyes were bloodshot from worry and sleeplessness. "Why my son?" he repeated aloud, voice cracking. Why was he chosen? The question echoed in the empty room, unanswered and haunting. Gregory sank onto the faded couch, hands trembling as he stared at the quiet phone, willing it to ring with news from the hospital. Ethan's condition had shown a flicker of hope, some improvement, but his cryptic muttering still filled the nurse's reports. "They chose me," the boy whispered again and again, like a spell no one could break. Outside, unseen eyes seemed to watch the house from the shadows. A flicker of movement behind drawn curtains, a faint silhouette lingering near the street lamp's pool of light. The feeling of being observed settled heavy in the night air, a silent threat. Back at Lincoln Elementary, the old building stood stoic beneath the moon's cold gaze. The janitor's closet door creaked softly as Marcus, Simon, and Merritt crouched to examine the floor. Dust motes floated in the flashlight beams, disturbed by their careful movements. Simon knelt beside a loose panel, fingers tracing its edges. "Here," he whispered. With shared effort, they lifted the panel, revealing a narrow staircase plunging into darkness. The air that rose was cool and stale, smelling of damp earth and forgotten years. Marcus shined his light down the steps. "Looks like we're going in." As they descended, the sound of their footsteps echoed softly against the concrete walls. The basement sprawled before them, cluttered with old furniture, broken desks, and boxes of supplies that had long since passed their use-by dates. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional drip of water somewhere unseen. At the far end, a false wall caught Simon's eye, slightly misaligned and marked by faint carvings. His breath caught. "This has to be it." Merritt stepped forward, brushing away dust and cobwebs to reveal symbols that matched the runes on the envelope. His voice barely rose above a whisper. This is the school's original crest. I've seen it in some of the old documents about Lincoln's founding. It's tied to local legends, stories about a protective order formed over a century ago. Marcus ran his hand along the carvings, a chill crawling up his spine. "It's like the past left us a message," he said, voice tight, "and it's echoing now, calling us to listen." Simon's skepticism wavered as the room seemed to pulse faintly with a strange energy. The wooden box at the chamber's center was worn but sturdy, sealed with an iron clasp rusted by time. The trio exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever lay inside, it was tied to the mystery that gripped Fairbrook, and to Ethan's fate. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets that no one dared speak aloud. Beneath the school, a secret was waiting to be uncovered. The dull creak of the loose floor panel echoed sharply in the stale air as Marcus knelt down in the janitor's closet, his flashlight beam slicing through the shadows. He worked carefully, prying at the wood with his fingers until the panel shifted just enough to reveal a narrow gap. Beneath lay a hidden stairwell, swallowed in darkness. "This has to be it," Marcus murmured, his voice steady but tight with anticipation. Simon and Merritt exchanged a glance before Simon pulled his own light from his pocket and shone it downward. A faint damp smell rose up, mingling with the musty scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. One by one, the three men descended the narrow stairs, the sound of their footsteps muffled by decades of neglect. The air grew colder and heavier with every step, pressing against their lungs like a silent warning. Marcus's heart pounded not just from the physical exertion but from the uncertainty of what they might find. Behind them, the heavy panel closed softly, sealing them inside the darkness beneath Lincoln Elementary. At the bottom, the beam of their flashlights revealed a cramped basement cluttered with dusty boxes, broken desks, and crumbling textbooks. The walls were cracked, peeling paint hanging in irregular patches like dead skin. Cobwebs swayed lazily from exposed pipes overhead. The place felt abandoned yet oddly preserved, as though time had stalled here, holding its breath. Marcus knelt and brushed away decades of grime from a faded bulletin board, his fingers trembling slightly. "How did no one know this existed?" he whispered, eyes scanning the shadows. Simon's voice cut through the silence, laced with skepticism. "Probably just an old storage area no one bothered to document properly. A forgotten relic." He reached for a rusted metal door at the far end, but it wouldn't budge. Locked up tight. Merritt, his usual composure replaced by something sharper, pulled at a loose brick nearby, revealing a narrow gap. "Try here," he said, voice low and urgent. Simon slid his hand through the gap and found a hidden latch. With a click, the false wall swung inward, revealing a small chamber beyond. A rush of colder air spilled out, carrying with it a strange metallic tang and a faint hum that set their nerves on edge. The flashlight beams darted inside cautiously. The walls of the chamber were covered in carvings, intricate symbols etched deep into the stone. Marcus stepped closer, his breath catching as he recognized the patterns from the envelope Simon had shown him earlier. The same runes, worn but unmistakable, pulsed with an almost imperceptible glow under the flashlight's sweep. "What is this place?" Merritt asked, voice barely above a whisper, eyes wide with disbelief. At the center of the room sat a worn wooden box, its surface rough and cracked with age. The lid was sealed tight, the edges bound with iron clasps rusted by time. Marcus felt a sudden chill as he reached out, fingertips grazing the carved symbols on the box itself. The cold seeped through his skin, a wave of unease washing over him like icy water. He pulled back slightly, a shiver running down his spine. Simon, ever the skeptic, scoffed quietly. "This has to be some elaborate prank. Maybe a student's art project that got buried down here. Nothing more." But his eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt as he studied the box's worn surface. Merritt's gaze locked onto the box's crest, a faded emblem embossed on the wood. His hand trembled slightly as he traced the outline. This is the school's original crest. It's tied to the old legends about the protective order," he said, voice tight with emotion. "That group was said to have been founded here in Fairbrook in the early 1900s, a secret society meant to shield the town's children from harm." Marcus swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the discovery settle on his shoulders. If the order really existed and this box belonged to them, what does that mean for us now? What warning did they leave behind? Merritt's eyes never left the box. Whatever it is, the past had left a warning, and it was now echoing into the present. Ethan's eyelids fluttered open slowly, his gaze piercing through the sterile hospital room as if searching for something unseen. The steady beep of the heart monitor and the faint rustle of nurses moving outside barely registered in his mind. His eyes, once clouded and distant, now held a sharp, haunted clarity. He turned his head slightly toward his father, Gregory, who sat rigid in the chair beside the bed, clutching Ethan's clammy hand as if it were a lifeline. "They are coming back," Ethan whispered, his voice soft but unwavering, carrying an urgency that froze the air. The words hung between them, fragile yet heavy with meaning. Gregory's heart pounded fiercely, and a cold wave of fear surged through him. He leaned closer, voice trembling but steady. "Who's coming back, son? What do you mean? You have to tell me." His eyes searched Ethan's face desperately, trying to catch a flicker of explanation in that haunted gaze. Ethan's lips parted slightly, but no clear answer followed. Instead, he murmured cryptic phrases. "The chosen, the circle, the guardians." His fingers twitched as if reaching out to grasp a memory slipping away. His tone was calm, yet beneath it lay a weight of something ancient, something no boy his age should carry. Gregory swallowed hard, struggling to piece together a puzzle that seemed to grow more tangled with each breath. The chosen? The circle? What do those words mean? Who are the chosen, Ethan? His voice cracked, revealing the ache of a father grasping at fragments of his son's broken mind. But Ethan remained silent, eyes fixated on a corner of the ceiling as if seeing beyond the plain white tiles. Gregory's grip tightened. The man's mind raced. Was this the boy who had been so full of quiet innocence, now speaking in riddles born of some otherworldly torment? Down the hall, in a dimly lit office cluttered with papers and books, Simon Voss sat hunched over the strange wooden box. The carvings on its surface seemed to shimmer faintly in the low light, the ancient runes twisting and turning like living shadows under his fingers. Simon's brow furrowed, frustration mingling with fascination. "Not a key," he muttered, voice low and grim. "More like a warning." He traced the symbols again, feeling their coldness seep into his skin. The box seemed less an object to open and more a message to decipher. Simon pushed back from the table, eyes distant. He needed answers. He pulled open a battered volume from the shelf, a collection of town records and folklore, and began scanning pages, searching for any clue that might connect the runes to Fairbrook's forgotten past. As he read, the details began to emerge. Stories of a secret society, long dissolved into obscurity, that once vowed to shield the town from unseen dangers. Guardians chosen from the community, bound by oath and blood to protect against dark forces lurking beyond the veil. The vanished boys, their disappearance suddenly cast in a new, ominous light. Could it be that the children had not been taken by a cruel captor but selected, drawn into a hidden role neither the town nor their families understood? The thought unsettled Simon deeply, challenging his skepticism. What price did such a choice demand? And why had Ethan spoken of the circle? Back in the hospital room, Gregory sat motionless, the weight of the unknown pressing on him like a physical force. His son's whispered warning echoed relentlessly in his mind. "They are coming back." The words carved themselves into his soul, an unshakable premonition that something terrible, inevitable, was closing in. A shiver ran down Gregory's spine as he realized the fragile thread between hope and dread was growing thinner by the hour. He clenched his fists, resolve hardening amidst the fear. He would protect his son no matter the cost. But first, he had to understand the shadow that had chosen them. In every shadow, a choice must be made. Silence that screams louder than words. If you crave stories that haunt and unravel mysteries, hit subscribe now. The truth is waiting. Power flickered erratically across Lincoln Elementary, plunging classrooms into sudden darkness before reluctant bulbs sputtered back to life. The old wiring groaned beneath the strain, as if protesting some unseen disturbance. Outside, a cold wind rustled the bare branches of the woods bordering Fairbrook, casting long skeletal shadows that danced just beyond the reach of the street lamps. Parents huddled in their living rooms, whispering about the strange noises, whispers carried on the wind, faint and distant, calling for their missing children. It was as if the night itself was alive with secrets. Inside Principal Merritt's cluttered office, the tension was palpable. His hands trembled slightly as he shuffled papers, his usually steady gaze flickering toward the window. The storm outside seemed to mirror the chaos growing within the town. "Another blackout last night," Merritt said, voice low but urgent, his eyes narrowing as he looked across the conference table. The janitor found footprints near the west wing, small, but they lead into the woods. Simon Voss leaned forward, fingers steepled, his skeptical mind struggling to connect the dots. Footprints near the woods? Could be anything, animals, kids sneaking off. But these power failures and the reports of figures, I can't explain it. And the parents' stories. Those whispers. Detective Marcus Lane rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I've been out in those woods myself after dark. Felt like something was watching me, not natural. We can't ignore the fact that the boys vanished without a trace. But now this. It's like something else is happening." His voice dropped, thick with unease. "The parents say their dreams are all the same. This place bathed in soft light. A voice promising safety but demanding a price. It's not just coincidence anymore." Gregory Caldwell sat apart from the group, his hands clenched tightly on his knees. The worry etched into his face was deep, torn between hope and fear. My son, Ethan, he's here alive. But is he really safe? Or is he trapped somewhere, hiding something worse? Every time he speaks, it's in riddles. I don't know if I'm protecting him, or if he's protecting something darker. Merritt sighed heavily, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. We have to call an emergency meeting with the school board. There's talk of shutting down the school until we can figure this out. But closing the school means admitting defeat, and I'm not ready for that. Simon's voice was steady but firm. We've seen what's happening. Power cuts, strange sightings, parents hearing those whispers. Whatever took those boys, it's not done. We need to confront this head-on. Marcus nodded, the weight of the responsibility pressing down on him. But confronting it means risking everything, our safety, the town's peace. And who knows what we'll find out there. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes like ghostly fingers scratching at the glass. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows lengthening as if reaching inward. Merritt's gaze flickered to the dim hallway beyond, where the silence of the school felt heavy, almost watchful. Gregory stood abruptly, his voice breaking the heavy silence. If my son is part of this, if he's involved in whatever is happening, then I need to know. I need to help bring him back fully. Simon placed a reassuring hand on Gregory's shoulder, his eyes steady. We'll get to the bottom of this. Together. As the men exchanged determined glances, a faint whisper slipped through the cracked window, soft, insistent, calling the children back to a place beyond reach. The line between protector and captor had blurred. Under the cover of night, the dim beam of their flashlights cut through the heavy darkness of the hidden chamber. Marcus's breath was steady but shallow, his senses sharpening with every cautious step. The faint hum that had begun earlier now filled the air like an unseen presence, vibrating through the walls and beneath their feet. Simon's brow furrowed as he flipped through the pages of a thick tome, the musty scent of ancient paper mixing with the damp earth and cold stone. Merritt's hand rested on the carved symbols etched into the wall, tracing their contours slowly, as if trying to summon meaning from the worn grooves. We're close, Marcus whispered, voice barely audible, his eyes flicking nervously from one shadow to another. These symbols, they're not just decoration. They're a message, a warning. Mr. Bennett adjusted his glasses, the dim light reflecting off the lenses as he squinted at the strange runes. I've seen nothing like this, he said quietly, his usual calm voice tinged with unease. It's like the language itself is alive. The walls began to pulse softly with a pale, almost ghostly light, casting long, twisting shadows that stretched and recoiled like restless spirits. The chamber felt smaller, the air thickening, charged with an energy that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. Simon's skepticism wavered, his fingers trembling slightly as he closed the heavy book. Are you feeling that? Simon's voice cracked. It's like the whole place is watching us. Merritt swallowed hard, nodding. It's no ordinary basement. Whatever is here, it's connected to what happened to the boys. To Ethan. The hum swelled into a low drone that seemed to vibrate through their bones. Marcus's eyes locked onto a faint outline in the center of the worn wooden box resting on a pedestal. There, almost invisible until now, was a narrow seam running along its side, an opening hidden in plain sight. As if drawn by some invisible force, Merritt reached out, pressing his palm against the box. A sudden shiver ran down his spine, and the air turned icy cold. The glow from the walls brightened, then dimmed, revealing a secret compartment sliding open with a soft creak. Inside lay a battered leather-bound journal, its edges frayed, the cover embossed with an intricate emblem matching the school's original crest. Marcus picked up the journal carefully, the weight of history palpable in his hands. This belonged to Arthur Langley, he said reverently, remembering the town's long-forgotten headmaster, the man who built this school. Simon leaned in closer, his earlier doubts replaced by a growing fascination. Let's see what secrets he left behind. As Marcus flipped through the brittle pages, The faded ink began to reveal a story etched in careful handwriting, an account of an ancient ritual, one crafted long before the school's walls rose, designed to shield Fairbrook's children from an encroaching darkness. The text spoke of the void, a malevolent force lurking beyond the edges of reality, demanding a sacrifice every generation to keep its hunger at bay. The chosen children, Marcus read aloud, voice heavy with meaning, were taken to a place between worlds, a liminal space where light and shadow dance, so the darkness might be held at bay. Merritt's grip tightened around the journal. It explains the disappearances. The boys weren't just taken. They were guardians, part of a ritual to protect us all. Simon's face paled. But what kind of price are we talking about? How far did those guardians have to go? And why was Ethan left behind? A sudden creak echoed through the chamber, causing all 5 men to freeze. The light flickered, the shadows deepening into shapes that seemed to breathe. Marcus's heart pounded. He glanced at the others, each man's eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "We've uncovered a legacy none of us were prepared for," Marcus said quietly. "But we have to understand it fully if we're going to protect the children and this town." The hum slowly faded, the chamber returning to its cold silence. Yet the weight of the journal's truth pressed down on them all, a silent promise that the past was far from over. But what price did the guardians truly pay? Ethan sat motionless in his hospital bed, his pale fingers clenched tightly around the thin sheets. His eyes, once clouded with confusion, now stared unblinking at the far corner of the sterile room, as if tracing the outline of something only he could perceive. Gregory Caldwell stood nearby, his hands pressed to the cold window pane, shoulders slumped with a weariness that seemed to seep from his very bones. The boy's sudden silence had drained the color from the house, leaving an empty ache that no doctor's words could fill. It was late, the dim glow of the hallway light casting long shadows into Ethan's room. Gregory's voice trembled as he leaned close, desperate for any sign of connection. "Ethan, son, can you hear me? Please, say something." But Ethan's lips moved only slightly, whispering words that chilled Gregory deeper than the night's cold air. "The circle breaks at dawn." The phrase hung in the room like a ghost, a riddle with no answer. Gregory's heart pounded fiercely, a mix of dread and helplessness swirling inside him. "What does it mean?" he asked quietly, swallowing the lump in his throat. Ethan's eyes never left the corner. "The circle breaks," he repeated, voice distant but steady, as if delivering a warning from beyond. Across town, Simon Voss sat hunched over his cluttered desk, the envelope of cryptic runes and the weathered journal spread before him like an ancient puzzle. The candle flickered, shadows dancing wildly across the walls as he ran a trembling hand through his hair. He stared at the phrase Simon had just been told, "The circle breaks at dawn." His skepticism wavered, replaced by a creeping urgency. "We can't wait any longer," Simon muttered, voice taut with unease. "If this ritual is failing, if the boundary is weakening, then every second counts." Marcus Lane paced the cramped office beside Simon, hands clenched into tight fists. His face was drawn, eyes dark with sleepless nights and the weight of responsibility. "Gather everyone. We need a search party ready by first light. The journal points to a place in the forest, ancient stones arranged in a circle. That's our only lead." His voice was firm but carried the exhaustion of a man chasing shadows. "We can't afford mistakes." Principal Douglas Merritt nodded solemnly, glancing at the growing map of Fairbrook spread across the table. The school's image was forever stained by the disappearances, and he felt the heavy burden of leadership press down harder than ever. "We must protect the children, those who remain, and those we hope to find." His voice betrayed no fear, only determination. "The town needs to believe that we can stop this." Night deepened outside the windows, the world holding its breath as wind stirred the bare branches of trees like restless fingers scraping the sky. Inside the room, the group's whispered plans filled the air, punctuated by the occasional distant siren or the soft rustle of leaves beyond the glass. Time felt fragile, slipping through their grasp like fine sand. Gregory sat again by Ethan's bedside, watching as his son's chest rose and fell with a slow, uneven rhythm. The boy's pale face was shadowed by the flickering hospital monitor lights, his expression unreadable. Gregory fought back tears, feeling powerless against the unknown forces closing in. Why him? Why now? The questions burned hotter than the fear. Ethan, we're coming for the others, Gregory promised, voice cracking but resolute. You won't be alone in this. At the edge of the forest, the first light of dawn was still hours away, the darkness thick and impenetrable. Marcus, Simon, Merritt, and a handful of trusted volunteers gathered quietly, dressed in heavy jackets against the early chill. Their breaths misted in the cold air, mingling with the faint scent of pine and earth. Each man carried a flashlight, the beams cutting narrow paths through the shadows as they approached the ancient clearing. The stones stood silently in the moonlight, weathered and moss-covered, arranged in a perfect circle that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The ground beneath was soft, the leaves and twigs muffling their footsteps as they entered the sacred space. A strange hum vibrated through the air, subtle yet unnerving, as if the earth itself whispered warnings. Simon's voice broke the silence. The journal said this was the ritual site, the place where the boundary between worlds is strongest. His eyes scanned the surroundings, wary and searching. If the circle breaks, then whatever it's keeping out might come through. Merritt exhaled slowly, steadying himself. We have to hold it together. For the boys. For the town. Marcus shone his light across the stones, catching a flicker of movement at the edge of the clearing. A shadow shifted, vanishing instantly. His heart quickened. Stay alert. Something's here. The men exchanged tense glances, the air thick with dread. Back at the hospital, Gregory's phone buzzed sharply. A text from Marcus. At the circle. Beginning search. Pray for us. His fingers trembled as he typed back. Bring them home. The minutes stretched taut like a drawn bow, every heartbeat echoing louder in the silence. Outside, the first faint blush of dawn colored the horizon, casting long fingers of light through the trees. Gregory returned his gaze to Ethan's face, the whispered warning lingering in his mind. The circle breaks at dawn. Time was running out and so was hope. The search party arrived at the ancient stone circle just as the first light of dawn stretched faint fingers across the sky. The forest around them held its breath, the usual morning chorus of birds and rustling leaves swallowed by an unnatural silence. The air hung heavy and thick, almost suffocating, pierced only by distant whispers carried faintly on the cold wind. Each man moved with cautious steps, the soft crunch of their boots on frost-hardened earth the only clear sound beneath the low murmur. Marcus Lane led the way, eyes sharp and scanning, heart pounding with a mix of dread and determination. Beside him, Simon Voss gripped his flashlight tightly, every muscle taut, while Principal Merritt's face was pale, lips pressed into a thin line as if holding back his own rising fear. As they stepped inside the circle of weathered stones, the ground beneath their feet trembled, a subtle, rhythmic vibration that seemed to pulse from the earth itself. A sudden chilling wind spiraled around them, tugging at their jackets and whispering through the trees, as if unseen fingers were reaching out. The whispers grew louder, twisting into indistinct voices that seemed to call from just beyond perception. The men exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke. Something ancient and powerful was stirring. Then, emerging from the shifting shadows, ghostly forms began to materialize. The pale, translucent shapes took the unmistakable forms of the missing boys, Ethan's classmates, each one frozen between worlds. Their eyes were wide and pleading, mouths moving silently as if trying desperately to speak, but no sound escaped. The boys reached out with trembling hands, fingers stretched toward the living, desperate for help yet trapped in an invisible cage. Marcus's breath hitched. "By God!" he whispered, stepping closer but restrained by an invisible weight of fear. The sight was more than he had imagined. These were children caught in a twilight neither fully alive nor dead. Suddenly, the air shimmered at the center of the circle, and Ethan appeared. His figure was solid and alive, but his eyes held an otherworldly glow, haunted and sorrowful. He stood at the very edge where light met shadow, the boundary between the known and the unknown. His posture was erect but heavy, as if the weight of unseen burdens pressed down on him. He looked directly at Marcus and the others, his voice steady yet laced with a deep sadness. They chose me to lead them back. The words hung in the cold air, thick with meaning and responsibility. His gaze swept over the group, then rested on each man as if silently pleading for understanding and strength. But the shadowy boys recoiled, trembling with resistance. An unseen force pushed against the boundary Ethan stood on, threatening to pull him back into darkness. The ritual that was meant to protect and reunite them was breaking apart, fragile, teetering on the edge of collapse. The ground trembled harder, and the whispers twisted into urgent cries. Simon's voice cracked, barely audible over the rising storm. "We don't have much time. If this breaks, if the circle fails, those boys, they're gone." Principal Merritt swallowed hard, the severity sinking in. "We must hold the line," he urged, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. "We owe it to them, to every child." Marcus squared his shoulders and glanced at the faces of his companions. They were men pushed beyond reason, driven by hope and desperation. "Form the ring," he commanded, voice steady despite the chaos building around them. "We do this together." The men moved quickly, circling around Ethan and the ghostly figures, hands linked, creating a fragile human chain of protection. They began to chant the incantations from the ancient journal, voices low but growing stronger, each syllable a shield against the encroaching darkness. The stone circle seemed to pulse in rhythm with their words, light flickering along the carved runes etched into the rocks. Ethan's lips parted, whispering the final words of the ritual. His voice was a soft command, full of conviction, carrying the weight of generations. The shadowy forms faltered, their edges brightening as if caught in the first rays of dawn. One by one, the ghostly boys' shapes solidified. Fingers turned from transparent to flesh, their hollow eyes filling with recognition and relief. The air warmed slightly, the oppressive chill beginning to lift. Tears streamed down Gregory Caldwell's face as he embraced his son, relief flooding his being in a wave so powerful it left him trembling. Yet, even as hope blossomed, a cold voice echoed from the surrounding darkness, low and menacing. It whispered a warning, chilling every bone. "The cycle will continue. The void always hungers." The group stiffened, fear and determination clashing in their hearts. They understood this victory was fragile, a pause in a much larger struggle. In that moment, courage and fear collided. The air inside the stone circle grew heavy, thick with an unspoken tension that seemed to press down on the shoulders of every man standing there. Principal Merritt's voice cut through the silence, sharp and steady despite the quiver he felt deep in his chest. "Form the circle. Hold hands. Repeat after me." His eyes met each man's, silently pleading for strength as he opened the worn pages of Arthur Langley's journal, the brittle paper trembling under his grip. One by one, Marcus, Simon, Mr. Bennett, and the others moved swiftly, closing ranks until their fingers clasped tightly. The cold night wind swept through the clearing, swirling fallen leaves at their feet, but inside their human ring, warmth stirred, fragile, yet defiant. The first incantations slipped from their lips, rough and hesitant at first, but as they grew in confidence, the words took on a rhythm, a pulse like a heartbeat echoing against the ancient stones. Shadows writhed just beyond the boundary of their circle, dark and twisting as if alive, lashing out at the invisible barrier forming between them. Merritt's throat tightened as the shadows surged forward, black tendrils stretching and curling like smoke desperate to break free. "Stay focused," he barked, his voice rising over the eerie hum that vibrated through the air. The men's fingers strained in their grasp, arms trembling with the effort to hold the circle intact. Ethan stood at the very center, his small frame rigid with determination, eyes fixed on the shifting darkness that sought to swallow them whole. "I'm ready," Ethan whispered, voice barely audible but unwavering. His lips moved, speaking the final words he'd spent sleepless nights memorizing, words heavier than any burden a 13-year-old should carry. As his voice carried through the cold air, the shadows recoiled, their forms flickering like dying embers. The eerie hum crescendoed into a chorus of wailing whispers, voices clawing at the barrier, desperate to break the ancient seal. One by one, the shadowy figures began to solidify, faint outlines hardening into the familiar shapes of the missing boys. Their features blurred at first, ghostly and insubstantial, then sharpening until they stood trembling, pale but whole. A wave of relief crashed through Gregory Caldwell as tears spilled freely down his face, his arms trembling as he pulled his son into a fierce embrace. "You're safe," Gregory choked out, voice cracking with a mix of disbelief and overwhelming love. Ethan's eyes flicked toward the last emerging form, his expression tightening with sorrow. The boy stepped forward, but before he could cross fully into the light, a chilling voice echoed from the surrounding darkness, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "The cycle continues. The void always hungers." The words slithered through the trees, a promise and a threat wrapped in one. The men stiffened, their momentary triumph dissolving into dread. Marcus clenched his fists, jaw set hard. "It's not over," he said quietly, eyes scanning the shadowed tree-line as if expecting something to step forward. Ethan's whisper cut through the cold night like a blade, his voice low but resolute. "We must be ready." The fight for their souls had only just begun. The air inside Lincoln Elementary felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if the building itself was holding its breath after the ordeal. In the quiet hallways, the faint scrape of sneakers echoed like whispers of a past that refused to fade. The boys had returned physically whole, but something invisible clung to them, an invisible weight etched into their movements, a silence deeper than mere shyness. They moved like shadows among their classmates, eyes cast downward, voices hushed or absent altogether. Each seemed trapped in a private battle no one else could see. Ethan Caldwell was different. Where before he had been timid and reserved, now he walked with a strange, quiet confidence. His shoulders squared, his gaze steady, as though he bore a responsibility far beyond his years. His steps echoed down the hallway with a measured certainty that unsettled those who knew him. In moments alone, however, his expression would soften, his eyes drifting to some distant place no one could reach. Principal Douglas Merritt sat behind his desk, fatigue deepening the lines etched on his face. Across from him, Detective Marcus Lane's fingers drummed anxiously on the wood, eyes sharp but weighed with exhaustion. They had spent endless hours in meetings, parents pouring out their fears, counselors discussing the fragile psyches of the boys, experts weighing in on the strange trauma. But answers were few, and the questions multiplied. "We need to watch them closely," Marcus said, his voice low but firm. "The boys might look okay now, but the kind of experience they went through, it leaves marks that don't show on the surface." Merritt nodded slowly, rubbing his temple. "The town wants normal back, but I'm not sure normal is possible anymore." Across town, Simon Voss sat in his dimly lit study, stacks of dusty books spread around him like a fortress. His brow furrowed as he sifted through old town records and faded diaries, piecing together fragments of a ritual that had protected Fairbrook generations ago. The stories were buried beneath layers of forgotten history and silence. Other towns that faced similar darkness but chose to hide it, hoping it would never return. Simon's fingers trembled slightly as he turned another brittle page. "They all chose silence," he murmured to himself, "and darkness grew stronger because of it." Meanwhile, in the modest Caldwell home, Gregory sat in the living room, his hands clenched tightly around a cold mug of coffee. He watched Ethan across the room, the boy seated by the window, tracing patterns on the condensation with a finger. Gregory's voice broke the silence, cautious but laced with concern. "Ethan, you've been quieter than before. What's on your mind, son?" Ethan looked up, eyes calm but distant. "They chose me," he repeated softly, the phrase heavy on his tongue, almost like a prayer or a warning. Gregory's heart clenched. He forced a steady breath, masking his fear with determination. "We'll get through this, Ethan. Together." But Ethan's gaze drifted beyond the walls, as if hearing voices Gregory could not. The whisper haunted every corner of his mind, an unrelenting echo that neither time nor comfort seemed able to silence. The community around them tried to stitch itself back together. The school corridors slowly filled again with laughter and chatter, yet beneath the surface, a fragile tension remained. Parents exchanged worried glances, wondering if their children too carried unseen scars. Teachers whispered about the boy's withdrawn behaviors and the quiet strength Ethan now displayed. Some nights, distant lights flickered over the woods bordering town, and neighbors spoke of faint, unexplainable murmurs that sent chills down their spines. One afternoon, Marcus walked through the schoolyard, the late spring sun casting long shadows across the playground. He spotted Ethan sitting alone on a bench, hands folded in his lap, staring at nothing and everything at once. Marcus approached cautiously, lowering his voice. "How are you holding up, Ethan?" The boy's eyes met his, steady and thoughtful. "I'm learning," Ethan replied, a hint of resolve threading through his words. "I have to be ready." Marcus felt a pang of both pride and sorrow. "Ready for what?" Ethan's lips pressed together, a flicker of something ancient and heavy in his gaze. "To protect. To carry on." As Marcus turned away, he realized the boy was no longer just a survivor. He was a guardian, unknowingly shouldering a burden that none of them fully understood yet. Back in the office, Merritt and Marcus prepared for another round of meetings, aware that the surface calm was only a fragile mask. They knew the coming days would test the town's resolve and the boys' fragile spirits. The price of safety was steep, and the unknown still lurked just beyond their sight. Some wounds healed only on the surface. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine, as a small crowd gathered quietly around the newly erected stone monument outside Fairbrook Elementary. Ethan Caldwell stood near the base of the circular structure, his eyes fixed on the weathered gray stones arranged in the same ancient pattern that had once held the boys captive. The sun filtered through the branches, casting long, gentle shadows that seemed to dance like silent watchers. His hands rested lightly on the cool surface of the monument, fingers tracing the subtle carvings, symbols both foreign and familiar, etched deep into the rock. Around him, the townsmen and fathers, the very same who had fought sleepless nights searching through the forest and deciphering cryptic journals, bowed their heads in solemn respect. Gregory Caldwell stood not far off, his usually stern face softened by a mixture of pride and lingering worry. Though the day was meant to celebrate courage and reunion, Gregory's eyes never left his son, as if silently asking, "How much of that darkness remains inside you?" Ethan's voice broke the quiet, barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of years beyond his 13 summers. "We are chosen, and we must guard the light." His gaze lifted slowly to meet the eyes of those assembled, steady and unyielding despite the boy's youthful frame. There was an eerie calmness in him now, a solemn promise, forged in shadows and tested by fear. It was a burden far heavier than most could comprehend, yet he bore it with quiet dignity. As the ceremony progressed, Principal Merritt stepped forward, his voice measured and firm, carrying the authority of a man who had witnessed the town's darkest hours. "This monument is more than stone," Merritt said, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "It is a reminder of sacrifice, of the unseen battles fought by our children and the community alike. We honor their bravery and commit ourselves to vigilance, so that what happened here may never happen again." The crowd murmured in agreement, but beneath the surface, an undercurrent of unease rippled. Fathers exchanged wary glances, knowing the scars ran deeper than any visible wound. Simon Voss, the private investigator who had once doubted the strange tales, now stood quietly to the side, a flicker of respect and apprehension shadowing his face. He caught Ethan's eye for a moment, nodding, a silent acknowledgement of the boy's transformation from the scared child who whispered, "They chose me," to the guardian standing before them. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Ethan lingered by the monument, the soft hum of the forest pressing in around him. The stone circle, a symbol of both protection and imprisonment, felt heavier in the afternoon light. His thoughts were a whirlpool of memories, of dark whispers, shadowed figures, and the desperate struggle to bring his friends back. He knew the ritual had only delayed the inevitable, that the darkness, patient and relentless, waited still. Gregory approached, voice low but steady. "Son, you carry a weight no boy should have to bear. Are you all right?" There was concern, but beneath it, a silent plea for his child to reclaim the innocence stolen from him. Ethan's lips pressed into a thin line, eyes distant but resolute. "I am different now, Dad, but this is my fight, our fight. We protect this town no matter what." His hand rested briefly on his father's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance but also a quiet warning that his path was set. As twilight deepened, the classroom at Lincoln Elementary, where it all began, stood empty and untouched. The clock's hands inched toward 9:14 a.m., the moment frozen in time. No voices echoed through its walls, no laughter or whispers, only a sacred silence that held a memory too heavy to speak aloud. In the stillness, they found their purpose. When the past refuses to stay buried, only the brave listen. Subscribe now and join us as we dig deeper into the unexplained. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores themes of isolation, fear, and the unknown, raising questions about human psychology, the power of choice, and the mysteries that may lie beyond our understanding. Its purpose is to provoke thought and inspire contemplation about the unexpected events that can shape our lives.